Hey, TCSTV viewers, we are live. My name is Dave. I'll be the host of tonight's event, which is Night Skies and Nature with Neil Zeller. Neil is a Calgary-based photographer, and he is somewhat of a legend when it comes to teaching photography here in Calgary, so you are in for a good show tonight. Now, we have Canon as a sponsor tonight, and in a conjunction as a partnership with us, we are offering something really special if you're looking to purchase some new Canon gear, but we can't talk about it live here. But if you want to, you're going to be getting an email if you've registered for this event already. But if you haven't registered for this event, feel free just to email Evelyn at thecamerastore.com. It's EVELYN at thecamerastore.com, and she will hook you up with this special promotion. Now, we are also dangerously close to Black Friday, so we are guaranteeing our prices until December 31st. So if the price changes, if you purchase it even today, before December 31st, contact us and we will refund you the difference there. So you can buy it in safety, which is really kind of nice. You don't have to worry about that Black Friday chaos. Okay? Now, there is a bunch of work happening behind the scenes here tonight. We have Gary and Jeff tonight, and they are making sure the show goes on without a hitch tonight. Now, I don't know about you, but what I really like about live shows is the ability to interact with everybody. So we will be monitoring the chat. We're looking for a lot of questions. I get to ask Neil anything you want. Keep it clean. That's all I ask. But the YouTube chat will be watching that. But if you don't want to log into YouTube, simply email me. It's very simple. It's just Dave at thecamerastore.com. I'll be monitoring that as well and putting some questions together there. Now, people who meet Neil in his workshops, he's a fantastic guy who's developed a really, really good following. You become part of his sort of family, and you find yourself using expressions like #Neil'dIt when you get a shot that you really like. And if you have a chance, we have a chance, if you want to join him on a workshop, virtual workshop on December 3rd, we'll be going live, which is a very cool thing. We'll be out in the field with for a virtual night photography workshop. And you can subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when we go live, or head over to thecamerastore.com under the events tab for all the details. Now, if you don't know our guest already, Neil Zeller is a teller of stories, a teacher, a commercial photographer in Calgary. Neil teaches and hosts tours in Alberta and around the world, including photographer tours in the far north, which we've gone with you when it was minus 40, and as far away as Africa, where it's not minus 40. He is an avid Canon shooter and has worked with a system from DSLR cameras and is currently working with the latest and greatest mirrorless cameras from Canon. And so it's kind of cool. We often get asked, what's in your bag? So rather than bringing your bag, we have got basically Neil's Christmas list on our website. I'll pop the link into the chat in a little bit here, and you can see what Neil carries around in his bag all the time. So Neil, thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm very happy to be here. Firstly, just want to say thanks to Canon for inviting me to this chat. And just a reminder that I'm extremely smitten with the camera store. I couldn't be happier with everything that the camera store has given me over the last.
This is a very expensive love affair, you know that.
So it is a very expensive love affair. I don't have any money left over to have any other vices like smoking or drinking.
Well, that's good. So the camera store saves your life, really, is what's going on.
That's what it does. So yeah, no, I'm really happy to be here and chat Night Skies and Nature and how those two are linked.
So we've gone through your presentation here. There's a lot to get into. I really encourage you guys to ask a whole bunch of questions in the chat, because we are going to be going back and forth a lot. So I love the interaction with it, and being able to sit side by side rather than doing something virtually is a real pleasure here. So let's get right into your presentation, and I'm going to interrupt you a lot, I think, tonight with questions.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So I have a slide deck that I built that I finished at 5:30 today. But it was I had the notes and I built the slide deck. But it's always interesting when I dive into the archives to build these programs. It's a ton of fun. So Night Skies and Nature. So we're into the slide deck here. So what makes night skies and nature so good together? You'd think night skies, you don't see nature, right? Like nature is like northern light stars, that sort of thing, right? It's a different kind of nature that I'm thinking of.
Yep.
Animals, birds, scenery, sunsets, that kind of thing. It makes them good together because when you're on the way to your night sky place, or you're scouting a location, you might as well have your camera ready and be ready for things that happen to pop up along the way. A lot of times we're heading out there at dusk, whether it's sunrise or sunset, at the end of the day or the beginning of the night. And we spend a lot of time driving at the edge of the day, and animals and birds are out at that time of the day too. So the other thing that happens is night sky photography is away from lights. right? You tend to leave your city or town and find a dark space. And away from cities and lights is nature. Like you end up with, finding animals and flora and fauna along the way. So many of my night shoots they tend to take me quite a ways away. So I get in the car and go.
So, I mean, Calgary's, 1.3 million people, right? We're a pretty big city. How far away out of the city do you have to go to kind of feel the darkness?
Well, the darkness or the nature, right? Well, right now, you don't really have to go very far in Calgary. We've got bobcats and coyotes and deer and moose and bear that are all in the city now.
Yeah.
And it's getting more and more as population pressures from the mountains push things in. So, and that works well for us on the prairies too, because there's a lot more moose and animals that tend to come to the prairies. But yeah, you don't have to go very far from Calgary. It's a big city, but we end up being, not as populated, not far from the city. So we go 20 minutes out of the city, and you can see Northern Lights on a Northern Lights night. There are Ducks Unlimited ponds that are just outside city limits that are full of birds and animals. We're only 60 minutes from the mountains. Right, so we don't have to travel very far. I tend to stay off freeways when I travel. I like going on kind of the back roads and slow down and see things. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the future about how do we go about this. One of the things that sort of sets me up for success when I'm shooting nature, when I'm going into places where the wild things are, is be ready for surprises. Right?
And this is a big deal, actually, because you just don't know what you're going to see. You don't predict it, right?
You don't know, but prepare yourself to get lucky. Right? I get comments all the time. Hey Neil, you get lucky all the time. And I say I get lucky all the time. How does that? How can I get lucky all the time? Well, it's sort of the end of preparation, right? It's you're just sort of ready to get.
You're setting yourself up for success, right?
It is for sure. So, what will surprise you? A sunset? No. A wide prairie vista? I don't think so. It's going to be an animal or bird. So I travel everywhere with my longest lens on and my camera set up for fast, sharp shooting. My settings, very simply, when I leave the house, 7.1, that's wide open on my 100 to 500 RF Canon lens. ISO 1000, that gives me some room with the shutter speed, and 1/1000th of a second. If I'm shooting 1/1000th of a second at a bird in flight, I'm probably going to get a fairly sharp image. Sometimes I got to shoot a little bit faster depending on the type of bird it is. But these are my starting settings. So from here, it's mostly just shutter speed adjustments to combat for light and situations. I do have a trick though. You mentioned you kind of spoiled it when we ran through this the first time. You're like, hey, what about auto ISO?
Exactly.
And on the auto ISO, it can save you just a little bit of frustration in changing when you have to turn from shadows to into bright light and whatnot. It kind of does that automatically. And you can use your compensation dial to, if they're all too dark for you, or if they're all too bright for you, you can actually compensate that auto as well when we're making those shots. So save yourself a little aggravation, set it to auto. I don't. I've got the experience that everything is pretty second nature for me when I'm shooting.
Well, it just comes with experience, right? You know what you've achieved success with in the past, so you kind of know what's going on, and you're very familiar with your camera, which is another big deal.
Yeah, so it's time behind the eyepiece, right? That helps with that. But that's a little trick with the auto ISO that you can do. You don't have to flip to TV or AV or any other semi-automatic modes. You can still use manual and get that little extra help. So lots of fun, and then you can get shots. Be ready for just about anything. One of the biggest keys to success out in nature is making sure your focus settings are good. Right? There's so many different options. I have 5 screens on my camera that I can set things up. Right? So we can chat about this a little bit right now. These are my 5 screens. I just photographed these today to show everyone.
I like how you're so prepared. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, it just people, especially buying these new modern mirrorless cameras, they are different than the DSLRs. Like the menus are similar, but there's extra things that come with the modern technology, including eye detect and the different types of cases that you can set your camera at. So a few of the points here that I'll make are, when you're shooting moving objects, keep your camera on servo AF or AFS on other brands. Your autofocus method, I'm loving the tracking methods in my R5. Subject to detect. You have a choice now, right? You have a choice. You can choose subject, animals, or vehicles now. So it'll actually, the camera will look for the shape of a person or an animal or a,
Yeah, I don't think, unless you've actually experienced it, I don't think you realize how impressive modern technology is when it comes to tracking objects. Face and eye detection for people and birds and animals, right? It's from an extreme distance too. It's not, they don't have to be really up nice and close.
Yeah, I can shoot a warbler's eyeball from 50 feet away, and it impresses me every time that I can, actually the camera finds that for me now.
Yeah, it is very, very cool to do so.
Yeah. So back to the screen. So eye detection enables, there's one, we'll talk about it in a little bit. When I'm shooting birds in flight, I'll actually jump to a zone autofocus, and that kind of takes off the eye detection, but it doesn't stop the tracking, right? Like it works so well. On screen 2, it's it's your manual focus. I leave my peaking guides on, my focus guides on, because it's nice to have that sort of indication if we are trying to get something that the autofocus is struggling with. Screen 3 in the middle. This one is probably the most important one of them all. And for shooting birds and animals who are a bit hectic and they move around a lot, is case 3, instantly focus on subjects suddenly entering the autofocus points. And you might think that's counterintuitive for a bird that you've locked onto focus and now you want to follow it, right? But if it's the only thing in the screen, it's going to stay on focus. But what if it turns really sharp and you have to bring your lens over and get it back in frame? Well, it's going to grab it again, as opposed to sort of remaining on what it thought was the direction that the bird was going. So through trial and error, this is the best one for me. Everything else is my settings. You can have a look at that. People can screen cap this and go from there. The one thing I would encourage you to do, though, and you'll see how well I use my camera in this photo, is there's a little button on the top right of my camera that's got the 5 dots in it there, and that is the quick button that you can change your focus area, right? So I can go for my tracking focus, which is the small center dot, where I'm trying to get like a moose's eye through the bush and get focus on that and not front or back focus. And I can jump over to wide area focus and make it way easier for me to get birds in flight. And the birds in flight part is probably one of the ones, it's a holy grail for most photographers who enjoy nature.
It is, 100%. Right? It is the holy grail, exactly.
Yeah, so I can tap that button, tap on the screen which one I want, and just carry on shooting immediately. It's such a fast way to kind of change your focus and go back and forth.
Yeah.
So. Using, like we said, use servo autofocus for moving subjects. The one shot will lock and hold that focus in that place, not traveling with your subject. So servo's the money, and you can get photos that are just amazing.
Well, it's great, and it's familiarizing yourself with the camera. I know usually in that function I set up on the depth of field preview button in the front of the camera to switch between one shot and servo focus. So if I'm tracking something, or if something that's still the owl on a tree like that, it's great. It's not moving anywhere. Yeah. Right? One shot.
But what if it takes off, Dave?
Then I just push the button and
right.
I switch to servo. Right? And I'm ready to go.
Yeah. So again, that's another one of those experience things that, but you can work on that, right? As long as you know where the buttons are, you can sort of prepare yourself for the bird that's going to take off instead of sort of being, focused on.
Well, it's all muscle memory too, right? You want to make it sort of instinctive. You just want to like, okay, this is happening. Here's what I got to do to get the best results.
Exactly. We move on to like best practices before you leave the house. Does that sound strange to you?
Well, no, not at all. Because it's one thing to pack your gear, but another thing to get yourself ready for the potential adventure.
Yeah. So before you leave your house, if you just so you're not fumbling with your camera where the owl or the bear or the coyote or the wolf, the moose in perfect light shows up, and you've got to put the right lens on, you've got to get the settings correct, and by then it's over, right? Like whatever's happened has happened. In the car, I keep the camera within easy reach of me, turned on, with the lens cap off, and ready to go. So if it's turned on, I can just pick up the camera, half press the shutter button, and it wakes it up. and away I go. So it's a very underrated habit also to keep an extra battery and an extra card in your pocket.
No, I constantly tell people, right? You know, if you're traveling, right? Even if you're shooting 10 shots or you plan on shooting 10,000 shots, always have a second battery. Doesn't matter.
I've been in a situation where I'm 200 meters away from the car because that's where the scene has dragged me away. It's amazing how far away you can get from your vehicle when you're hunting this kind of perfect moment, and the card filled up.
Yeah.
And it's devastating. It really is. So it's funny, in the R5, I'm shooting to both cards, the same image, right, as a backup. But that's the only moment. What I'll do is I'll pop one card out, stick it in my pocket, and then format that one and keep shooting. So it's a bit of a hack in the field, but
A certain little bit of nervousness goes on there.
Yeah, it always does, because now it's in my pants pockets, and maybe that card's going to go through the washing machine later, which is...
Now, are you shooting redundant, both the same RAW plus JPEG to both cards? Or are you shooting RAW to one, JPEG to the other?
No, it's just all raw.
All raw?
I'm shooting the same image in raw, both to both cards. That's more of a corporate thing for me, though, because I shoot in the field a lot, and if I'm only on one card, there's just a risk there to lose the corporate images.
There's a certain peace of mind when you have dual card slots.
It certainly is. So yeah, you don't want to be kind of stuck in that situation, that once in a lifetime photo op, and your battery die or your camera card fill up. So yeah, full battery, empty card, longest lens, wildlife settings, focus settings, lens cap off, camera on. And you know, you can get lucky, right? Like, this is my Angry Birds Blue Jay that I was able to get. There's some really unique things you can do when you're ready.
Well, and small birds like that, I mean, that's where a lot of the Canon cameras are phenomenal, because we're shooting 20 frames per second.
20 frames per second, and that focus system just grabs it and holds on, right?
And now the new R6 Mark II, right, up to 40 frames per second. So the smaller the bird, the more fleeting moment it is, right? The more you can capture within that.
And they move around, right? So, here's a hot tip, Dave.
Hot tip.
Get away from your car, especially in the winter.
So that's counterintuitive, because I like to be nice and warm and toasty.
Yeah, so as soon as you roll down your window, all that hot air piles out of the car and creates a heat wave. You've seen it in the summer, the waves are coming off the ground. The heat from the interior and the engine will distort the air and pretty much ruin a photo. So this is the best I could do at 20 below outside and 21 degrees inside the car of this Merlin that was standing on the fence post. It was a pretty nice scene, would have been good to get. But the camera there was no focus to get, right? That distortion was there, and you can't see through it. So, get away.
That's interesting, because you don't really think about that. You can't see the air, but it's certainly showing up in the photos.
And maybe you wonder why.
Yeah.
Your photo didn't turn out in that situation.
Yeah. Now you can be like a friend of ours, Mike Drew, who he doesn't believe in heat when he's photographing, so he just dresses warm, I think, and keeps the windows open in his car when he's driving around.
He doesn't. Yeah, our good friend of the show, Mike Drew, does not use heat in his car in the winter, so he doesn't get that. There's still heat coming out from the hood, so he'll end up parking his car downwind from the place he's trying to shoot, so that doesn't happen. So these are little things that can make a big difference when you're out there. Now, how on earth do you spot the wildlife in the first place? This is people...
Pure luck. Pure luck.
Pure luck. Just happen chance, right? One of the things that I do on a regular basis is just go slow, right? We travel distances. Do we travel distances or do we travel hours? How far is it to Lethbridge, Dave?
Well, it depends who's driving.
Is it 2 hours if you drive straight?
Yeah, from my place, yeah.
So it's not kilometers, it's hours. This is how we travel.
Yeah.
So I have actual time versus photography time. And so when I'm touring, when I'm hosting, it's always photography time, right? I've got this end sort of time that we're trying to get to, but everything in between is photography time. We stop for every opportunity, like the opportunity trumps schedule every time. We had a tour that we called the Hunger Games once because we were supposed to eat at 4:30 and we didn't actually get to the restaurant until 8:30 because the light kept getting better and better and better, and we just kept staying out there. So we'll go hungry for photos.
You're not going to starve to death, but those photos, right? And I 100% agree. Take your time. I mean, I recently sold a camera system to a customer who was an avid motorcyclist, but he found he was just putting in the miles. Right? And he's missing out on so much stuff. So he's bought a camera to actually slow himself down. So he would actually, take up this hobby to
Is it because it was a heavy lens that slowed him down, or?
No, it was a good package that he bought. But it was the fact that he was able to slow down and take more photos, right? Yeah. But you take a 2-hour drive, And certainly if you stay off the main highway, right, which is a big thing, because you don't see as much wildlife on the main highway; they're much busier.
And you can't stop; it's unsafe, right?
Yeah.
To be able to pull off on a highway with trucks are whizzing by and whatnot. Take the back roads, find gravel roads. Google. You can drag your finger on your Google Maps, and it'll actually give you different routes to get where you're going, and so it's pretty handy that way. Do you see it? Can you see it, Dave?
Well, I'm cheating a little bit here.
So just cruising around in the field. So one of the things that I do is look for the thing that doesn't seem to belong. This is how I spot the birds and animals that I, find the most. Is it's just there's an anomaly in the landscape. It's a lump in a tree. It's a dot on the horizon. It's a piece of dirt, and sometimes it's a Walmart owl, right? We call that. It's a bag in the field that you end up taking a bunch of photos and zooming in on and driving close and realizing it's a bag in the field, as opposed to an owl. But it doesn't take away the fact that you're probably going to have more opportunities that work out with that investigation than not. So. Like this was one that happened just this past Friday. We were cruising around near Drumheller, and I saw this little dot in a field, and I thought, okay, well, let's zoom in on that on the back of the camera, and just, that is, that's not nothing.
I'm no expert, but that's art more than
I see.
I would convert that to black and white, Neil. And
right. Well, it's a zoomed a long way in, right? Like that's it, and but I need to look at it. So it's definitely not a bag.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a rock. It's not sort of the right color. So maybe it's a bird, and like, oh heck,
Jeez.
It took off. I was so excited to see this short-eared owl. I've seen 4 of them in my life, and all at dusk. So this is a middle-of-the-day short-eared owl. So here I am getting this photo right now, the one you're seeing on screen, and I'm really excited to get it because it's daytime, it's sharp, it's got all the stuff I can zoom, I can crop in on it later, and get it. But what it led to was probably my best bird photo I've ever taken, and that investigation of that little dot in the field. Made my photography birding life to this point, really, right? It's the best thing I've ever taken.
It's a fantastic shot. I mean, the fact the owl is dead centered on you, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is well aware of you.
Yeah.
Eyes are up. It's and that's a great shot.
What I was surprised about, there was 4 of them. There's 4 of these birds that were hunting in the area. So we know they look like ravens off in the distance, but they fly different. So you kind of you realize that. And this one came in and landed off to the side of the road. I think it had a kill. A car had bumped it off it just kind of startled it off the road, and it went into the ditch a little bit. And it sat here. And this is a little video that I was taking. So I thought, you know what, this is really cool. I've got that cool photo of the bird. I'm going to shoot this video now, right? So they just flip it over on the R5 with the 500 millimeter, and then all of a sudden the bird jumps up and flies toward me.
So the amazing thing is the bird flew towards you, right?
And I just about died because here's a situation that when I was, I've been shooting for 10 years. This is the 3rd time an owl has flown directly at me or over me. The first 2 times I and my equipment were not up for it.
Yeah.
Right? And here's me with this time knowing that my equipment is probably up for it. I don't know if I am, but I know my equipment is probably up for it if I've got the settings right. And I end up shooting video.
Yeah. At what moment did you go, oh no?
And now I'm sad. Like in that moment that bird flew like that, I'm ruining my decision, right? But because I've been shooting a lot of video of animals and whatnot in these places, because it is so easy on this camera, it was instinct. I hit the red button on top, and I was back to shooting, and I got this pile of photos of this bird. This is the same bird, just shot as it came right toward me, made a left-hand turn from his side, and I got all these crazy photos.
No, that's a fantastic series of events there.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it. It was really something that I was so over the moon. I still am. I don't even know what to do with these right now. I don't enter contests when I'm thinking about it for that bird. I just thinking about the wildlife contest might get my money. So, and it all started with just finding this little
Now, do you
dot on
find
the
that
horizon.
the more you're out, because you're out a lot, right? Do you have more of a trained eye for it? Do you start seeing things that other people don't? I've been on car rides with people, and I pulled over, and they're like, "What are you pulling over for?" I'm like, "Do you see? There's a hawk in that tree there." And they're like, How do you see these things?"
Yeah, it's you start seeing more. You start seeing better. right? Seeing is as much of the skill as the photography, right? Because if you're not seeing it, you're not taking pictures of it.
Yeah.
Right? You're just going to drive by. So sometimes it's just a lump, though.
I'm not sure what to make of that photo.
So this is what we call a stony owl. That was coined by one of my students on a snowy owl tour. Heather is her name, and she called it a stony owl. So now we look for them, and this is the largest one I've ever found. The reason they're on the fence post is because they're not in the field anymore. They're not in the farmer's way.
Yeah.
So, but it's pretty interesting because if there'll be a couple of them side by side, and maybe someone around the post on the bottom, it's a snowy owl nest or a stony owl nest.
But the fun thing is, I mean, this is the adventure. This is part of the excitement, right? You never know what you're going to see as you're traveling around. Yeah. And so taking advantage of that, right, makes for a fun story, bad joke, but, it's a,
Yeah, it sure does. And then the lump that you've investigated might actually be something. So if you look really closely at this photo, I hope the viewers can see it. There is a snowy owl on that pivot, that irrigation pivot out in the field there. And it can be just such a neat, this is quite a minimalist photo. The lines, the colors, the light, everything's so cool, and that owl just makes it for me.
Now, do you ever just go out and sit in a blind or
Nope.
do anything like that? Are you one of those kind of guys?
I'm on the road. I cruise. So we cruise around. If we do find something, we might spend some time with it, such as these 3 hawks. So this was a really weird situation. We saw the lumps on the fence, and typically that's like signs. It's like a pipeline underneath, right, or an overhead power line or something, right? And they have like sign to indicate start and stop points of where this undergrounds are. But there were 3 hawks there, and on top of it, these 3 hawks were attacking a great blue heron in the pond next by. So we got this really cool moment out of it. It's always seeing and investigating. It's always the way to go. This is one. So I don't know if our viewers can see in the window. Do you see it there? Do you see it there, Dave?
Well, I know the answer to this one, so I don't want to comment.
So this one, I'm going to guess it's north of Drumheller, and I'm going to guess this is the most photographed barn without a bird in it. The piece of wood that's kind of sticking out on the corner is not a bird, it's just a piece of wood, but I'm sure every photographer that's out there has taken the investigation photo and then zoomed in on the back of the camera to see this. So it was pretty tricky. It's just a board. And if in the distance the cows look really weird, they're probably not cows actually, so it can be good practice to follow that instinct and investigate. So now I've got this photo of pronghorn and cows in a field, which is
They're having a party.
Pretty unique. So, can you guess, Dave, what my all-time favorite piece of equipment is for safarying?
Well, I want to say, some kind of tripod, some kind of lens, some kind of camera, but I know the answer to this one as well because I was helping you out with the train tour.
So the train tour, I talked a lot and did a big demo on how I use Google Maps. Google Maps is as big a safety tool for me as well. So I can be driving along, and the satellite views of Google Maps are taken during the day. If there's a night photo, you wouldn't see anything, right? So in the middle of the night, even in the evenings or wherever, I can get to a road, and if I'm going to turn down this road to follow an investigation that I want of an animal or something I've seen, I can stop really quick, open up Google Maps, and see where I am, see where this road goes. And it might be a driveway. Could be a dead end, could be a bunch of things, right? So safety-wise, I can look at it. Also, I can eliminate or add locations to it. Like, so this image I zoom in on and I find a little side road that looks interesting. There might be snow owls, a nice spot for snowy owls off the main highway, might be comfortable. And I look and I see that, it has the Google cars gone by. And now I can zoom right in there and see exactly what that situation looks like. And maybe in the summer that oil and gas right-of-way is drivable, but in the winter probably not. This isn't going to be something that's going to be plowed. So now I've saved myself a bunch of time.
And that's a huge thing because, especially around where we live, right? You can drive for hours and hours and hours and not really know where you're going, what's going on, and what to see. So it's a massive tool. So I'm glad you bring that up.
It's a great tool. It's the best one. Safety, convenience, time. I can, what I'll do for my tours is I'll put my destination in, and it'll give me the time that I'm going to get there, and I know what time I have to be there later. So I actually can do the math, and I say, okay, I got 4 hours for photography, and then it'll get me there exactly the right time. So it's a phenomenal tool. So that's the safarying part of it. That's the going out and being ready to shoot while you're going out to find these night sky opportunities. So the night sky opportunities are here now. So now the sun's gone down and you're there. So first, it's way easier to set up your camera for night sky photography. That sounds probably counterintuitive because a lot of people aren't terribly good at it. It can be a challenge, but it's very formulaic.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of, you don't have to, far less aggressive photography as bird photography is going to be. You don't have to worry about all the different autofocus settings. You don't have to worry about a whole bunch of different aspects.
Yeah.
It's setup and a little bit of experimentation.
Yeah, and so once you've got your settings, there's usually no reason to change them. It makes it easy to kind of set it and sometimes forget to go sit in the car. Or what I'll do, I'll set my camera shooting, camping, whether it's at a cabin, out in the woods or something, and I'll set my camera and go to bed. I call it set it and forget it. And that's how much easier it is to shoot at night, right? It's not, a lot of times it's not going to change unless dawn shows up. What you end up getting is some really cool results, including so many photos. But you don't know what's going to happen in that photo, right? At nighttime, if it's a starry, clear night, you can get these really great star trail sequences that you can put together in a free program called StarStax. You can just go grab it, you export all the images out, and then just bring them into this program. They put them together. The other thing you get is a movie. So these time-lapse movies are this is 590 25-second images put together in software to make the movie. And there's a real big surprise at the end of this just before dawn, and it's kind of what I hope, as you can see it coming into the frame now, is the Northern Lights showed up. This is looking due south, and this is in Middle Saskatchewan, so it was very cool.
Really? That's interesting, due south.
Yeah, so that was a neat experience. I probably should have woke up and checked, because obviously the lights were good that night, but we had photographed them earlier in the night, and we're pretty happy with it. So one of the downsides of the camera, leaving it out, is the environment.
So that makes a lot of people really nervous, including myself. I mean, I saw the glad that you actually use your cameras, and as Mike Drew always says, they're not museum pieces, right? They're not going up in value, right? They're meant to be used. I don't know if they're meant to be abused as much as you and Mike put them through. I mean, that certainly would make a lot of people really nervous to wake up to. So they survived, I assume?
Every camera I've ever bought, I still have and still use. My 5D Mark III that I bought in 2013 has over 1 million shutter clicks on it.
Wow.
I shoot less and less and less the more years go by. I guess I'm just getting more selective. But it blows my mind at how durable these things have been and just keep going. I've dropped these cameras. I've dropped them catastrophically enough that I've broken them. But you send them away and get them fixed, just like you would repair your car, right? Like people, I do the analogies that make sure you use these things. Like you buy a brand new car, it's shiny. Do you drive it on Deerfoot? And if you're not from Calgary, Deerfoot's our rocky freeway, and quite scary at times. But you use the car, right? So use the camera, like get it out there and get it to work. It's fixable, it's replaceable, it's insured, it's all these things, right? So makes it good. So we talk about that formula at night. So what is the formula? When I'm teaching and we go out at night, I give my clients this: ISO 1600, f2.8, 15-second shutter speed on a sturdy tripod. That's always a contention for me. Is I tell people, bring a sturdy tripod. They think the tripod they have is sturdy. It's probably not. And it's a sturdy tripod at night. You want to have that insurance, right? That tripod, the camera's not going to tip over. And a cable shutter release. So the cable release, the one that plugs into the camera, it's powered by the camera, doesn't need batteries. And it just replaces the shutter button, so you're not shaking the camera on these long shutters. So not the remote, not the app, not anything like that, the actual cable release. So this is a good starting point.
Okay, we're going to go back for just a second here. With those frozen cameras, right?
Yeah.
David Stewart, which is another Dave. These are the Daves we know. He says use a lens heater on low. Now, I don't know if with
But the back of the camera would be frosty. Everything else around it would be. Right. So you can people will tie those hot pockets, those chemical hot pockets around them. I didn't think it was going to get frosty that night, so I didn't take any extra precautions. But most of the time, it's kind of the end of the night anyway, and they dry out. I never disconnected the lens from the camera until the camera was completely dried out, right? Because it has the weather sealing on the good cameras.
No, I've shot with you in -40, but do you find do you take some precautions when you're shooting at like those extreme kind of temperatures, and that
So I do talk about it in the future about clothing and shooting in the winter at the very end of this, but your camera can handle the cold, right? More than you can. Yeah. If you don't have to bring it in. The only thing I would say, if you want to go in to warm up and you're not shooting anymore, it's not shooting away, bring the batteries in. Right? Bring them in with you, keep them warm, or stick them in your armpit or something, right? To keep them, keep your batteries warm. That's what the thing that'll limit you in the really, really, really cold weather, like 40 below. But yeah, the cameras can handle the cold. I've not had an issue with the Canon gear anyway. In things up to like 44 below, no issues that way. Now, Dave, what would be, so this is the settings. You go out now and start firing away at the night sky. What happens now? What's the issue? Why can't the camera? Why is the camera not actually taking the photo? Why is the lens hunting and hunting and hunting? What have I missed in this setting? I'll help focus.
Focus. Forgot about that. We're going to step back just one second here.
Oh, sure.
Tim Cox says, why not a remote, as in like a wireless remote? And then Jesse Traris says, what are your thoughts on setting a delay for the camera shutter release instead of a cable release? Like, why are you so adamant about like, actual cable release?
Cable release always works, no matter what. Again, doesn't need batteries. It's powered by the camera. It's just a physical piece that tends to work. And if you buy the branded versions, the Canon, they're rubber that can handle the colds, right? I've seen off-brand ones that get really brittle and fall apart.
Yeah.
The remote, sometimes you have to be close to the camera or have to be pointing at it. You can't set it and forget it. Here's the issue with a lot of these apps and things is you can't lock on the shutter. Like you set your camera on to multiple exposure shooting and just let it shoot, right? And this is how you make those time lapses, the star trails, is you can lock it on. I know there's ways to double tap and kind of do that, but it's always a bit janky with everything else.
There's nothing as
the cable
positive
release.
as actually being physically plugged into the camera.
Yeah.
It's the most positive way.
And it's replacing the shutter button. Everything else is a piece of software. It's battery operated. It's got, got to be line of sights, that kind of thing. This thing is attached to the camera, and all it's doing is replacing the shutter button that's on the front of the camera.
Great.
So
all right, so let's talk about focus, because this is kind of tricky.
Yeah, so this is sadness. This was a camera left out all night long, and there was this arc and the Steve and all these things that we talk about now, and it's sadness. And here's some zoomed in sadness.
That is sad.
It's so sad, right? So close up sadness. If your night photography isn't pinprick sharp, stars sharp, you don't have a photo. Here's happiness. That's happiness, and here's zoomed in happiness. So how do you focus though? How does it happen? Here's the rules. Here's how it goes. It's really wordy and seems kind of convoluted a little bit. So turn on the live view playback on your screen. The mirrorless cameras nowadays, this is the default. You're already seeing through the sensor. The idea is you need to be able to see through the sensor. If you have a DSLR camera, you need to flip the mirror up by pushing live view, and so the sensor can see what's out there. And then you can see it on the back of the screen. Zoom in the playback. Right? There's a little magnifying glass button on your camera. Zoom that in to a maximum zoom of 15 or 10, whatever your camera gets to. Locate a bright star in the sky that you can see on the screen. So you pick up your camera and you move it around till it gets Jupiter or something like that. Set the camera lens to manual focus. So you click the little switch on the side of the lens. Use the lens focus ring to dial in the sharpness, to dial in the sharp focus of the star. At 15 times zoomed in and kind of handheld or on a tripod, it might not look in focus. Make that as small as possible. When you go past infinity or back the other way, it'll grow. Like when out of focus is big, right? The light is bigger.
But that's the thing. The cameras have an infinity setting, right? So you would think I would just set to infinity because the stars are at infinity, but it's not. It's
not. So infinity is off of the edge of because you can dial your focus ring all the way around, and it'll go past focus. And that's because of heat and cold. So these cameras shrink a little bit, and the infinity changes in the hot as it does. If it's 40 above, infinity is different than if it is 40 below. And this gives you the opportunity to find that. So then you can start shooting, right? So caution though, if you change the focal distance of your lens, going from 15 millimeters to 35 or something, if you want to be a little closer up, you have to do this again. Your infinity point has changed. And once you learn this, you never have to do out of focus night photos again. I made a video though, to show this. So that was a lot of words, right? Here's the physical act of it though. There's the zoom button, once, twice, 15. So I'm looking at the screen, so there's my focus ring. I'll start turning the focus ring. And turn it until you start resolving light and stars will show up just like this. Like this is just a broom handle in my basement. But you'll see how I go.
Riveting, by the way.
Riveting, I know, right? This is great stuff. But I'm just going past, and then just making that as small as possible.
Now, do you use focus peaking at all? Have you tried that with stars?
I do. I find it not quite exactly accurate at times. Once I've done this, and then the peaking shows me that they're all in focus, but it's way harder because you could be out just a bit, and if you're out just a little bit, a tiny little bit, you don't have a night photo. Sadness photo. That's right. So you want bright, sharp stars, then that's the method. So we really, really like that a lot.
Cool.
The last thing for settings is white balance, and this is a moot point if you are shooting raw, right? Because you can make those changes in camera afterwards. The issue is if you shoot time lapses or long duration, long exposures over and over and over again all night. If you're on auto white balance, it will change it from time to time because there are no whites to balance to at night, so the camera's guessing.
Well, that's the thing, right? Nothing. You want to take away all the guesswork from the camera. Don't let the camera make any decisions. You are in a somewhat controlled setting. Take all the control away from the camera. You're in charge.
Yeah, I'm in charge. So my settings are tungsten bulb. You can just flip it to that. It's a little bit bluer than I like, or 4000K, right? And it can just be left on that. If you're shooting JPEG, you want to put in this Kelvin setting or get something that looks really good on the back of the screen because it's much harder to adjust later on than if you're shooting RAW. But if you're shooting RAW, this is all about my satisfaction, the back of camera, the BOC satisfaction. And it's a big part of it too when you're out there sharing with people and there's other people around and you're excited about things going on in the sky. So that experience means a lot to me, so I try to dial it in. And people really get that as well. Like a yellowy image at like 6000K is actually darker on the screen, right? And so it's harder to see too. So this is just a precursor image to start talking about what the camera is seeing at night.
It's quite the image.
Yeah, so now that we have our settings, we have our focus, we have our white balance, your eye sees the world at approximately 1/60th of a second. This isn't science. I've not read anything about this. This is my experience. If I wave my hand in front of my face, that looks a little blurry. If I take a picture at 1/60th of a second, it's a little bit blurry. It kind of matches, right? TV shows and movies are shot around there, 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second, in that range, and that's because it looks normal, right, at those frame rates. If I shoot at 10 frames a second, at 1/10 of a second, it's the videos are really kind of stop motion. If I shoot at 300 frames, it's hyper realistic and weird. But in still photography, we get to use these features to our advantage. Imagine if you could stop time and just let the light come into your eyes for 30 seconds, and then you get to see what that looks like. Yeah. You'd get this, right? So this is what you'd see. This is what your eyes are seeing when you're out there. And
that's a bit of a change.
It's a bit of a change, right? So this is what the camera sees, this is what your eyes are seeing. And it's some consternation for first-time Aurora viewers or night sky viewers that they get out there and they've seen all these incredible photos online, and then they go out there and they go, I don't get it, I don't see it. And I don't understand what's going on here. And then I tell them, well, here's some settings and here's how you focus, go take your camera out there, and it changes their life. The satisfaction level, the magic comes.
It's quite a bold statement.
Well, it truly is, right? This image shows like a white balance that's off, that's like a 6000K or 6500K white balance, or shot in auto, and then people might say this is amazing, but it's really kind of off from what the normal is, and then you get these really hyper saturated ones that people will post, and that's probably the one that's going to go viral on Twitter, is the oversaturated or artistically saturated. Like
so that brings up a point, right? When you have so much flexibility with Photoshop and post-production nowadays.
Especially at night, Dave, because how does it look? How does it really look? Right? Yeah. We're showing things that our eyes have never seen before.
So how do you determine what your comfort level is?
It's my comfort level.
And do you care about the haters online? I mean, it is very difficult because
are there haters online?
People on the internet are really nice.
So when I teach my beginner class, I try to get through to people that comparison is the thief of happiness, Dave. And as opposed to trying to compare and figure out how that person did it, or because that person did it, I'm not going to try and do it. Instead of that, use the images for inspiration to get better, to challenge yourself, to come up with, like, if you want to try and get that, go online and find out, call some people, get some mentors, take a class or two and see if you can get to that level and then you can, go from there on your own way, right? So that inspiration is there. If you want to take it to the next level in artistic modes, right? What's one of the most artistic modes out there? The purists will say that it's pure photography, but black and white. They remove all the color, completely gone, right? That's as more artistically inclined than adding a little extra color in this image. And so I caution worrying about what other people are making their images look like and just saying art.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you are in charge of what you want your images to look like finally there. We got a quick question here. Terry chimed in. She goes, what lens do you use for your night shots? Like, is there one lens that is your go-to lens?
Yeah, I used to use an off-brand 20 millimeter 1.4 lens. But since the RF 15 to 35 lens, since I've got that one.
It's a killer lens.
It's sharp to the corners. You don't get any of the weird coma things that happen in some of the other wider, faster lenses. And combined with the stronger ISO performance in the R series, the R5, it's fabulous. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So my night sky lens is the 15 to 35. I will use the Canon EF, the old model, 11 to 24, the f4. And I'll stretch my settings to get what I need out of the sky. But that 11 is really hard to kind of leave behind. Like 11 wide it feels twice as wide as 15.
Every millimeter counts on the wide angle.
It really does, and that's the widest.
Now, do you find 2.8 is somewhat limiting? Would you prefer a 1.8 aperture lens?
I would take a Canon RF 15 millimeter 1.4. I would take that in a heartbeat. I don't know if that's ever coming, but that would be cool. The 15 though at 2.8 is not limiting, not with the ISO performance of the new system. It's fabulous.
No. And do you ever use like a star tracker or anything for exposures?
No, I'm there's the rule of 500 that I follow. Take the length of your lens, say 20 millimeters, that's where you're dialed into, divided by 500, and now you have 25 seconds that you can run your exposure without seeing noticeable star trails on your big picture. So you'd kind of live by that. If it's like if you're using like a 100 millimeter lens, you only get 5 seconds before you start seeing noticeable star trails on it. So.
And do you do stabilization at all? Do you?
Well, I'm on a tripod.
So do you turn the stabilization off?
Yeah, I do. The mirrorless cameras, they do it automatically once you're on the tripod. Yeah. So I did before that. No, right? I'm not the technical guy either, so I'm glad I knew that. Thanks. So on the DSLR cameras, though, there's an active in the lenses, in the EF, Canon stuff even, there's an active kind of component to it that you shut off the stabilization. Otherwise, you'll get kind of a motion blur on everything, and then you have sadness again. So
Brenda just asked, can a Canon R6 work? And I'm like, Brenda, absolutely.
Canon R6 is fabulous. Yeah. It's a night sky beast. My second R lens camera will probably be an R6 for its night sky performance.
Yeah, the lower the resolution, bigger pixels, better high ISO performance,
and better, easier to clean up with noise reduction, that kind of thing. So yeah. Variables at night. So this is we'll move on here. Those are the settings. So we can talk about that formula, that 1600 ISO, wide open aperture, and 15 or 10 seconds. But there's variables, right? So when I'm looking at deep dark night, stars only, Milky Way, that sort of thing, you want to go long, right? You want to go wide lens. You want to go long exposures. So 30 seconds, right? You want to go. So this is a nice night sky Milky Way image, nice and clean, nice and sharp, 6400 ISO, f2.8, 30 seconds, right? Just because you need the extra light, because there's not a lot of light in the Milky Way. Meteors are completely the opposite, right? If you take a meteor and shoot it at 30 seconds, set up a scene that looks good at 30 seconds, and then a meteor shoots through in a fraction of a second, you're not going to see that meteor on your sensor. Now,
did you set yourself up for success with that shot? Because that's a pretty cool shot.
Yeah, this is a redemption shot for me, actually, because I missed a really big one on Perseids meteor shower earlier that year. But yeah, so this one was set to, I was making a time-lapse movie, which is kind of the same idea as shooting for meteors. You want shorter shutter speeds to make it to make it a quality movie in the end, right? You don't have a lot of changing things, right? So I was shooting meteor settings, which are basically like high ISOs, f2.8 wide open, and 5 seconds or 2 seconds or whatever it can give me. Time lapse is interesting because time lapse makes the movie and time lapse makes the star trails, and so with time lapse. The movie, so you can see it moving here, and it's fabulous. It's so much fun because you get these incredible moments. We showed this earlier, but there's even cars on the highways if you look over the lake off in the distance. So this one was ISO 3200 f2.8 for 15 seconds, and it makes the same images as Star Trails. This is exactly the same scene. It ran through the StarStax program to make it, so it's actually making the same thing. But the choice is, do you shoot 2-second photos to make a smooth time lapse, or do you shoot 30-second images to make a less onerous build of the star trails? Because 2-second photos for 3 hours is 5,400 images at 70 megabytes a piece. That's a lot, right?
You have a NASA-inspired supercomputer at home, do you not?
Yeah, exactly. It'd be a nightmare, right? You can do this exact same scene in this Star Trails with 360 images. You can go 3 hours for 30 seconds each, and make this image just like that. So it looks exactly the same. There's no difference. Northern Lights. Okay, so here's where things get crazy with the formula. You kind of throw everything out the window, because I've seen the brightest Northern Lights where I'm shooting 1/60th of a second at ISO 1000 f2.8, and then I've also shot dim auroras that look really nice still, 30 seconds long, 6400 ISO. So it can be anything, right? So
I'm gonna stop you right there.
Why? Why, Dave?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's natural. I think there's some tomfoolery going on there. I think there's some Photoshop action happening there.
You're right. I put the road in. I was actually standing in a field.
The road to Endor. Is that what it is?
Anyway, that's a little bit of fun we have on May the 4th. May the 4th, right? I post that one. So, but for the real Northern Lights, that was real Northern Lights, by the way. ISO 1600 f2.8, 30 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It depends on how bright the lights are. Right? It really, really does. Like this one, these were 1/30th of a second inside the city limits of Calgary.
That's insane. That's crazy.
This was insane. But then what do you do when you have noctilucent lights in a comet? So this is what I do. I go out and I try. I test, right? I see what it looks like. I try to make it what it needs to be in the moment, right? Moon eclipses. Right, the Earth eclipsing the moon. I've never shot that before. I've never, it's not something you can get a ton of experience. You go out and you try, right? The thing we call Steve in the sky, right? Like, how do you shoot that well? And it can extend to night photography of other terrestrial things, like the holiday train that I shoot every year. Meteors, like what's the thing? This is a composite of where all those meteors fell in the sky. It's one kind of backing photo, and then put those in there. And then crazy things happen, like a Chinese rocket burns up in the sky over Calgary. And I get these photos. What are the settings, right? So it's a lot of trial and error when you're out there. So you have the base settings to start with, and then the trial and error thing, and then when the thunderstorm comes, when the Northern Lights are out and the car goes by, you just throw everything out the window and just hope to God you got it. That's what it comes down to. So it's this is probably my favorite night image that I've ever taken.
That is amazing, right? When you look at all the factors that have to come together for that shot to work.
The image is called Collision. It's the collision of a bunch of stuff that happened that night. So this is summertime too. Calgary is the best place in the world for Northern Lights in the summer. Up north, they don't even get Northern Lights because it's too light out. So that's night sky. So there's lots of, I guess the recap on it is, get your base settings, and then don't be afraid to try stuff, right?
That's the fun thing. I mean, digital doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can practice and try.
Truly.
And see.
Dress warm when you go out there, though, right? Especially in the wintertime. We get a lot of night skies in the wintertime. It gets dark at 4:30. It doesn't get light until 8.
Yeah.
We got a ton of night skies to work with, but dress warm. So
just go back to that shot there.
Yep.
Adriana asked, "Is that one single shot?"
That's a single photo.
Single photo.
I've got 14 of them just like that with different lightning bolts that night. It's crazy, and this was interesting because the Northern Lights came out so bright that the sun had just set, and I could see Northern Lights and photograph them in the bluey dusk sky earlier in that night. It was one of those one of those moments that you get once every couple or 3 years in Calgary.
Yeah.
The photo I showed of the inner city aurora was another one, and so I've seen like 4 auroras bright enough to really, really see over Calgary. So,
Cool.
dress warm. So, photographers are the only hobbyists other than hunters that stand just stock still in the cold. And so you'll see a lot of photographers out there getting more and more camouflaged because their stuff is warm. So if you go to like a sports performance store and you buy cold weather gear, that gear is meant to shed heat when you're biking or snowshoeing or cross country skiing. And so like my boots are Baffins, they're minus 100. The boots that you buy for minus 40 are meant to go from the house to the car in minus 40. They're not meant to stand out in the cold. So if your hands and feet get cold out there, you're done. And so I want people just to understand that they should be nice and warm. That said, your camera doesn't have to come inside, right? Quick talk on editing. So there's a before and after edit. Actually an after and before edit, in that order. So we can chat all day at what the camera's capturing, how the edit's working. But back in the day when we were shooting film, we were only halfway there when we pressed the trigger. We were forced to edit that photo, right? And whether that put more light through it on the developing table or add colors and tints and airbrushing and all that sort of thing, we did it then. The program I use to edit is called Lightroom. Dave, that's a play on words. Do you know what of?
No, Neil.
Darkroom.
Ah.
So it's the digital darkroom.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize, even in Photoshop, you look at a lot of the tools on the side there. There are tools that were used in the actual darkroom itself.
Exactly.
You want to use your hand or the wand to actually make things lighter or darker. These are all tools from the darkroom itself.
Yeah. So make it what you want. So this is one of the things that happen in when people are editing. They take the picture and they don't realize that they're not done, and they say, well, this is disappointing. Right, it can be disappointing. So do some edits, right? So this is Lake Louise with the Milky Way behind it. I guarantee it didn't look like that in camera when I took it, but that's the experience of it, right? That you can make it your own art. A whole panoramic at Cypress Hills. This wasn't edited very much. This is one of those nights that was incredibly spectacular over Calgary,
That's it. That's all.
That's pretty much it. So I'm happy to continue chatting with the people.
Well, speaking of using your camera as a tool in the screen, David also says trust your histogram when setting your exposure. Now, do you eyeball it? Do you use your histogram all the time? Is it part of your mantra to kind of like check it out?
But there's no light. But there's no light at night.
But in general. Right? If you're shooting,
Yeah, I'll use the light meter. I'll look at the histogram, for sure. Right. I am not a traditionally trained or scientific guy, so I look at the back of the screen if I like it. And over experience, I've realized that in editing, I need to salvage highlights, so I'll shoot a little bit darker, right? And you can see that on the histogram that you're salvaged all of that, right? But I've done it more. Taken longer probably to figure that out, but at night you throw away the meter and the histogram because they just don't work.
Yeah. Laura James asked earlier. She goes, "What's your go-to distance in your lens to be wildlife to get the sharpest image?"
500 millimeters, and if I had 1,000 millimeters, I would use that. The closer I can get, the better. And these new RF lenses are so sharp and spectacular at all lengths. So I covet a 600 f4. Covet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you've used like the Canon makes the 600 f11 and the 800 f11.
Yeah.
They're very good in their own right. Do you find yourself, with your 1-500, which is an incredible lens, wanting more reach, putting a teleconverter on it to try and get a little more reach?
No, it's already dark enough at 7.1. And like I say, the camera, with its internal strength and the ISO capabilities, it's better than what 5.6 used to be. Right, because the ISO had to be, it just yours grainier, right? I'm happy at 500 right now, right? But we always covet more, right? But I want the 1-500. I would like a 2-1000 at 7.1.
Well, Canon does make an 800 5.6 and also a 1200 5.6, but
they're a lot of money. Yeah, so I'm not a wildlife photographer per se. Like I don't earn an income from my wildlife photography. I shouldn't say that. I host tours to do that, but I'm helping others get the photos. So it's I spend my money on the things that I am making the most money on too, right? So it is a bit of a trade-off at 7.1 as opposed to 4 at 600, right? But that's a $24,000 or $5,000 lens, right?
Yeah, it's a little pricey there.
Yeah.
A little pricey there. So if you were looking for a mirrorless camera and lens combo to get started, to get more serious about photography, what body and lens would you kind of recommend as a starting kit? I mean, we can look at your list, but it's not always affordable for everybody.
Well, the R series has now the crop sensors, the R7 and R10, and those are more affordable, and the lens will be more affordable. So it's just like the Rebel series or the 80Ds and the 90Ds of the DSLRs. So you can jump into the mirrorless system, which I would do. The focus systems and the ISO capabilities are just so strong these days that it makes a big difference. Even learning, right? It gives you so much more satisfaction. So, but if you were to really kind of dive into it, I would get like a R6 with a 24-105 on it and get a good nice walk around lens that has enough reach and enough width to kind of do the things, right? But as soon as you can't jump to, what you like. If you like wide landscapes, that's one thing. If you like wildlife, that's another. So you would jump to the long lens first, or if you like landscapes, you jump to the wide lens first as your second lens.
Yeah, I've always recommended people sort of, figure out what you like to shoot. Are you a portrait person? Are you a landscape person? Are you wildlife, right? And, go out and shoot and spend a lot of time shooting, figure out what you like to shoot and buy the right tool for that job. The R7 is a fantastic camera for wildlife photographers. You have that 1.6 crop factor, so you want the 500 is even much longer than that. So and their autofocus system is brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, agreed.
Let's see. What are some resources to figure out when certain birds and wildlife will be in your region? You just go out all the time.
No, again, an experience factor there too, just learning after a while. But Alberta Birds on Facebook, Birds of Alberta, the book, right? You can actually, it's a really beautiful book made by a local John Acorn and a good friend of mine, Chris Fisher. He co-hosts my tours actually from time to time now. And he literally wrote the book on birds in Alberta. So there's resources, that book, eBird is a website and app that you can get. iNaturalist is another one, and you can sort of watch what other people are doing. It's probably the best resource these days in the social media world, in the connected world.
Well, people get a great bird shot, right? They're posting it.
They're posting it, and then you'll know more, and then as you know more, you get more curious, and then you end up sort of becoming a bit of an expert at it. So in the winter time, we get great birds. We get snowy owls. We have these short-eared owls. We have goshawks, we have bald eagles. Like Calgary is really famous right now because we have resident swans in the winter. The Bow River stays open all winter now, and these swans, we have a native population that don't migrate anymore. They've been happy, and what that does is that keeps raptors around too because they have food. So because there's tens of thousands of geese that stick around now too.
And even like about an hour south of Calgary, there's Frank Lake, right, which has it's a great place for birds.
Yeah, Frank Lake has a famous pelican that's had a little injured wing a few years ago. Elsa the pelican that stays. There's an outflow from the water treatment plant in High River that actually keeps the water open. Yeah. And so some birds hang around there too. So it's interesting. Yeah, lots of resources out there in this connected world. I would just kind of join up with groups that are doing the things you're interested in.
And is there resources you use for the night skies as well, as far as figuring out like weather patterns? If tonight's a good night to go out and shoot, do I want to spend an hour driving out into the countryside and going on safari? My ultimate goal is to shoot. But do I have apps like that work for you?
Yeah, if you have a pen, everyone, I'll name some things off right now. ClearDarkSky.com. Windy is an app. The Weather Network. SpaceWeatherLive.com. It's got a beautiful app that works really good. They're kind of the source. They use the real spaceships that are reading information, and they look at the sun and create predictions on when the northern lights are going to come. So Space Weather Live.
Natalie says the Merlin Bird app, ID app, is a great resource too.
The Merlin ID app is cool because you can take a picture of it, and you can actually, if it's on your camera, take a picture on the back of from the back of the camera onto your phone, put it in that app. It'll tell you what kind of bird it is. It's great. You can get there's mushroom apps. There's plant apps, there's tree apps, there's all kinds of things that you can do that as well. So,
and this one is a good one because I'm getting like this too. Is like we do a lot of our YouTube shooting, and it's during the winter, and I get cold when you're standing around. There's heated gloves and heated vests and stuff. Do you invest in those things whatsoever? And there's a good question here. Is that how do you convince yourself to actually go out when it's that cold? Like when you open up the door,
That's a great one.
we've all been there, right? You're like, oh, I got to get out of the house. I open up the door, and it's just this blast of cold, and you're like, why does the air hurt my face? What am I thinking? What am I doing?
It really does take a lot of, it really does take a lot of kind of get up and go. But once you're out there, it's always worth it, right? It's one of those things. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? Once you've done it, it feels good and you're worth it. And the results are almost always like another saying that I came up with to help people sort of motivate them is put yourself in the path of great potential, and you'll get lucky almost every time, right? So you can't see or shoot the northern lights from your living room. You can't photograph these birds from the front of your TV, right? Like or your bed, or if you're sleeping, or if you're camping, you just sort of sit around the campground. You don't actually go out and do these outings. If you're not doing that, you're never going to see anything.
No,
right?
So I really actually liked how you talked about the photo safari, right?
Yeah.
Your ultimate goal is to shoot the night skies, but it's the adventures along the ways, and that's a big part of like just travel. Period, right? It's not actually getting someplace. It's the trip when you are driving.
Yeah.
Seeing a certain diner or a building that you've never seen before.
Yeah. We just did a drive. We just wanted to do a scenic drive in Drumheller the other day, and I got that unbelievable short-eared owl image, and I'm so blown away by it and so thankful that we just took the choice to go for a drive, right? See what we see. Safari is literally safari, and take what comes to us by getting out there.
No, 100%. If you had, we've posted your list of your sort of gear list there. Mm-hmm. Is there something that you find you're missing, or do you find that kit is complete?
No, it's not. No, not even close. So I actually have a hole in my distances between 35 and 70. So my next lens is probably going to be the 24 to 70 2.8, or I've been borrowing from the camera store, from the rental department, the 28 to 70 f2.
So it's an interesting lens.
Yeah.
Because it's known as the paint can lens, and I just rented it to another customer, and he just came back with this big smile on his face because it's just like, this is an insane lens.
Yeah, I shoot major events, usually in dark spaces, and this has been just a ridiculously good lens for that. F2 is twice as much light as f2.8. And it makes such a big difference. It is a heavy beast, that lens, but I'm on a sling and it's fine. And like I'm using the long lenses all the time, so I'm used to it. But if you're not used to carrying like your little kit lenses on the packages you buy are 10% of the weight of that thing. So, but it's worth it. Like the light gathering and how sharp it is, and it's so much fun to use. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. So you have a bunch of tours coming up. You're constantly promoting yourself, which is fantastic. And your tours are so well known and well attended. What do people kind of expect if you've never been on one of Neil Zeller's tours? If you haven't had a chance to Neil it yet,
Yeah, I've had conversations on there's some intangibles that happen on my tours. One is I have my own tour van. I purchased my own tour. I rented vans forever, but I've been able to kit out my tour van. My current guest joked that the back of my van is like a 7-Eleven. So we've got water, sparkling and still, in a cooler.
Perfect.
There's a whole pharmacy of things, Tylenols to chapsticks to Dugerol to all kinds of things, Imodium, Tums, hot hands. So I bring I always have the hot hand heaters ready to go for everyone, no matter what. Like I have a big box of them there at all times. I have chips and candy and gluten-free granola snacks and whatnot. I got blankets when it gets cold. I have cushions on the seats for people, so it's a little more comfortable. I've got a PA system in the van, so when I'm talking, and my guest has a PA system, so when we're talking, everybody's hearing it. I put a big step on the outside, so these big giant boots that we wear, you're not going to slip off. Like I've got a big graded, running board step on it. I try to look after people. I try to take care of them on tour so they can enjoy it, right? They can get away from their life. They can be, relaxed and enjoy, and without sort of any other cares. Even where we're going. And then the other thing I do is when we stop for supper or lunch, I always pick somewhere that's meaningful, like a small mom and pop restaurant that we found that we love. We won't go to Tim Hortons or A&W if we can help it. Sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, it's the only thing. But I try to make these tours as valuable and meaningful as possible, no matter what they are, whether it's a one-day bird tour or a 5-day holiday train tour that's coming up, or 10 days in the Yukon or 20 days in Tanzania. Every one of them has to be meaningful, and every moment has to be special.
Yeah, and I get that out from a lot of people. A lot of the feedback is your tours are very well organized. People are well looked after, and they have a lot of fun, and they get some really really good results.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, do you have a choice in gloves or mitts or a brand that you like? I find I don't have warm enough hands, and I'm constantly complaining. Ask Drew, our videographer. I'm constantly complaining. My hands are getting cold on the episodes.
Yeah.
Do you have brands that you love and you prefer?
Yeah, so I buy a glove that has a flip on it. It has an inner glove that I can actually use my touch screen and whatnot. But I tend to take the glove off and on a lot to use my camera, like we all do, right? But this specific glove, and I think they sell them here, has a zip on the back that you can stuff a couple of those heated hot pockets in, and it creates a little oven in the thing. So your hands can come out, they can get cold, but as soon as you put your hand back in the glove, it's been sort of preheated and your hand gets warm instantly. So you can go in and out, but then if you're just standing there, your hands are always warm. As your fingers or if your digits are warm, you're okay. And if they get cold a little bit and they can get back in there and warm up, it's fine. So they've got to have the flip on them. They're kind of puffy and nice. I bought mine at Cabela's, a Canadian Tire, or here. And they just work really, really well. Hunters equipment, right? Things that hunters are using.
Yeah, you might. It's always. Don't worry about what you look like. If you're warm, it doesn't matter. Fashion doesn't matter if you're freezing cold.
We're not a fashion show out there. If we're warm, it's good. The Baffin makes a boot called the Impact. It's -100. You get it at Cabela's. They're $279 a pair, I think. The more and buy them one full size bigger than your foot, and they'll fit perfectly. But I've been going out at -12 with them right now, and I'm getting angry. My feet are so warm. So I gotta take my foot out for a little bit, let it cool off, and then stick it back in. Another nice thing about those boots, this is a really weird little intangible thing, but they stand straight up. You can put your foot in without even touching the boot, and you can take it out without touching the boot, and the liner doesn't come out.
Oh.
We've all been there, right? The liner coming out of your winter boot.
Oh, it's never a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at your page here with items in your gear bag.
Yeah.
I see some flashes here as well, and the Godox flashes.
Yeah.
Do you ever use those outside? Do you take them with you? They are battery operated, right?
Yeah.
But does that incorporate into any of your landscape photography?
No, I haven't done any lighting of my landscapes. I will, if there's a person involved, I'll do I could use like a little lume cube or one of these lights to kind of create light behind, so we have a backlit situation. But for the most part, it's all natural lighting and whatever's there. And I will run like longer shots for background, and then do shorter shots for the lit things that are in my scene, and then put them together in Photoshop. It's not what's there. It's just gathering light because we have dynamic range limitations.
100%. So, well, let's wrap this up a little bit here. So December 3rd, we're going live. This is a very exciting event, right? Because we're able now with technology to actually go live instead of being stuck in a studio like this. Wear some warm boots and stuff if anybody is going to be out there that night. But it's going to be a virtual night photography workshop. So you actually be able to see through your camera what you're shooting, how you're setting it up. The whole experience is going to be really immersive, which is going to be a very, very cool experience. So definitely sign up for that on our YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell. We'll let you know when that happens. And I want to thank Canon for sponsoring tonight's event as well, and to think about the partnership we have with them with that very special offer. So if you haven't subscribed already, please let Evelyn know at EVEALYN at thecamerastore.com. She'll get you in touch with those promos, which is very, very cool. And know that Black Friday is coming up, and our prices are guaranteed through December 31st, which is a very cool thing. You don't have to have that rush and chaos of Black Friday. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight, Neil. It's always a pleasure. It's always fun, and some fantastic images and tips and tricks.
Yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Can reach out on my channels if anybody wants to chat about touring or settings.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right, guys, we'll catch you again next time. Thanks for joining us.